Unspoken Issues.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unspoken Issues, the official first episode of the Unspoken Issues podcast. Here we're going to be talking about single issues. If you hadn't had a chance to already go check out the 0 issue of our podcast, it's there, right there on the Unspoken Decade website, along with the Facebook page. My name's Jesse Starcher, and with me tonight, of course, the co-host with the most, his name is Chris Armstrong. Chris Armstrong, this is our first episode. I mean, are you nervous?
No, I'm ultra excited, though. I get to dive into some Ultraverse, which, I mean, to be honest, it's all led to this. The only reason I've done any podcasts
This is it.
is to eventually get to an Ultraverse episode of something.
Ultra excited to talk about some Ultraverse. Well, yeah, dude, we talked a little bit about what we were going to be covering here. And this is going to be prototype number 1 from Malibu Comics. Dude, you were, like you said, this is your bread and butter. This is your toast and jam, if you will. So you were digging some prototype. I mean, if people didn't have a chance to listen to the 0 episode, prototype, Ultraverse, just briefly touch on it one more time. Why did that mean so much to you?
Well, the Ultraverse stuff, when it first started hitting shelves and I started seeing ads for it, it looked pretty cheesy. Even as a 13-year-old, I wasn't that blown away by what the ads were selling me. It looked kind of like, oh, this looks like kind of rip off Marvel and DC stuff. I was already into Image, which was kind of the same thing, but they had super hot artists that I was really into. Ultraverse didn't really have anybody I recognized as far as creators at the time, so I was skeptical. I specifically remember there was a Comic Scene magazine, which is kind of like a Wizard-style magazine about comics.
I remember that.
And there was an issue where they had spotlights on all these new comic book universes that were hitting the shelves that summer.
Oh, boy, were there a lot.
Yeah, there was Defiant, which was Jim Shooter's like post-Valiant comics. There was Ultraverse. There was, I think, Clive Barker's Marvel line was included in that. Razor line.
Razor line, yep.
And I believe maybe Milestone was one that was featured. But I read the article on Ultraverse, and I was just blown away, with the concept, because they were basically taking the position of the anti-Image. Which Image was super art-driven, and it was extreme 90s comics, the focus was on spectacle, sort of. Ultraverse was taking the tact of, we're going to bring in veteran comic book writers. We're going to build a superhero universe from the ground up. It's all going to be planned out ahead of time. The article just did a great job of selling me on it. I liked a lot of the art in the early Ultraverse issues, even though that was kind of their weak point. They did have Norm Brayfogle. George Perez came in pretty early, Barry Windsor-Smith, and some guys who would become big later, like Derek Robertson, Aaron Lapristi, and now I'm blanking on the original Mantra artist's name, Terry Dodson. Those guys all kind of got their start with Ultraverse, or at least did a lot of early work with Ultraverse.
Well, yeah, and like I said, these guys were kind of a blip on my radar. Never knew much about Ultraverse other than just after we finally got our comic shop here in my local town. They were on the shelves, but I had to pick or choose. I was either staying with Image Comics or staying with the Marvel Mutant books, which I was big into. The other thing was, man, am I going to take a chance on this and have it be in a flop? I don't want to waste my money. Even at, 13, 14 years old, I was pretty frugal with what I wanted to spend my money on. Sometimes you had a hit on your hands and sometimes you didn't. And I was just really kind of, frightened to take a shot at Ultraverse. Some of the stuff looked cool. I really didn't start paying attention to those titles until the latter half of the 90s, when Marvel all of a sudden started showing up in them. And that's a different conversation for another podcast at another time. But yes, so tonight we're doing Prototype. Prototype speak to you in any way? Did you say this was the first Malibu comic, or was this the one you were like, okay, I got to get my hands on it? Why Prototype?
No, the first 3 Ultraverse comics were Prime, Hardcase, and The Strangers. Mm-hmm. They all came out in the first month of Ultraverse. I believe Prototype was part of the second wave, along with, I think, maybe Mantra and Sludge. It seemed like for the first 6 months or so, every month Ultraverse would add a couple more titles until they got a pretty large stable of different books. I think Prototype was either in the second or third wave there. And at that point, I was just like, I was so happy with Prime and Hardcase and The Strangers. I was buying every Ultraverse comic that came out. Basically, I know I had Prototype. There may have been one or two that I skipped in the early going, but almost everything that they put out, I would just grab it. And I really liked Prototype. It wasn't one of my favorite Ultraverse comics, but it's a strong second tier Ultraverse book for me.
Okay, all right. Only familiarity of this character that I have is from the Ultra Force cartoon. So I didn't know what I was getting into here with the actual comic. This, let's talk about the creative team real quick. Give a shout out to the writers Tom Mason and Lynn Straczewski. Our artists are David Ammerman and James Pascoe. This particular issue came out in August of 1993, and that's the cover date. According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, this was actually has an on-sale date of August 6, 1993, which is... That's something I wasn't really used to, was like the cover date and the actual on sale date matching. Because usually it's like
that surprised me too when I saw that. I don't know. I mean, we're going back over 25 years, but I remembered this being a little earlier on than August because I think the Ultraverse launched in like April or May. So I would have thought this would have been like a June or July release.
Cover price $1.95. Let's talk about the cover. So
$1.95 was a little steeper than I think the average comic. I think Marvel and DC's standard price was probably $1.25 or $1.50 at this point. And like 92, 93, the standalone Spider-Man, the adjectiveless Spider-Man title was $1.75, whereas most other Spider-Man comics were $1 or $1.25.
Okay. Right.
The Ghost Rider book was $1.75 when I started buying that, whereas most comics were $1. I'm not sure what differentiated those.
So let's talk about this cover real quick. David Ammerman here, James Pascoe putting together this cover with, I mean, hey, it's Prototype, and there's Prototype right on the front cover. Don't get much more, hey, here I am, than that. Now, I don't know his power set, but just by looking at the cover, you know, if you're going into your local comic book store or you're going into your convenience store in the 90s, you know, it's all about the cover. It's all about getting the attention of the potential reader, the potential buyer, bringing them in. I mean, I'd say this does the trick here. I mean, we got this cut-looking dude on the front of this. He's decked out in what I believe is armor. It's
right. It almost looks like he's got a standard, you know, tights superhero costume accentuated with some armor. The helmet, the big shoulder pad, the gauntlets, and then the jet boots or whatever. But it seems almost like part of the suit is just fabric material, and then he's got the armor complementing it.
So you know what sticks out to me, and I just noticed this looking this cover over here, but his belt looks like it has an eyeball in it.
Yeah, it does.
Is that now? Other than this first issue, I've never read anything past this. Yeah. I assume that, you know, eyeball belt guy is not something that pops up in the issues, right? That isn't like a thing. That's just belt.
I would. It's been a while since I've read the Prototype books. Aside from this first issue, I would bet that's probably a camera.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, we got Ultratech.
Yeah. I don't know if it's ever referenced, but that's what it looks like to me. You know, it's a standard, you know, early 90s cover, strike a pose for the main character. A lot of the Ultraverse books had these type of covers. Prime #1 is just him kind of standing there showing off the costume. Hardcase has a similar cover. A lot of early 90s comics, they're not particularly original, but they get the point across, give you a look at the character, hoping that'll be enough to draw you in. He has the look of kind of like, you know, the standard response from a lot of people is going to be, oh, it's an Iron Man ripoff.
Yeah.
But once you get into the book, you know, it's the same trope of an armored superhero, but there's a lot more going on than that. Okay. Also, it was polybagged with a trading card, as was the style at the time.
Dude, you showed me a picture of these cards. Were those the cards that were polybagged with it, or were these separate ones? Okay.
I'll bet the first issue had a card that was a sample from the Ultraverse trading card set, the first series. Okay. There are, I think, 2 other sets. I've got a complete version of set 2, and I've got a bunch of loose cards for set 1. I don't have any of the set 3. I think those are harder to find. But yeah, I mean, trading cards at this time was a huge market, much like comics. It hit a boom in the early 90s, so any comic company also had a trading card set, or trading card sets, and Ultraverse was no different. So yeah, I pulled out some prototype and prototype related trading cards whenever I was digging this issue out to give it a reread.
So there was something in there that one of those trading cards said Ranger.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't show up in the book, but I'm just curious: is that a prototype character as well?
Yeah, it is. Well, let me save that for when we talk about the actual story.
Okay, that sounds good.
Because that's one of the interesting things about the way this series develops as it goes.
All right, well, let's just get into it then. I mean, I've got my notes here as to kind of what happened. Right at the beginning, by page 2, we see this guy flying around this armored suit, getting his arm blown off. We find out this guy is a dude that goes by the name of Bob Campbell, working for Ultratech. This happened in the past because we fast forward to the future where apparently Ultratech has given him a new arm and he's clicking this. You see him click this arm on. I remember seeing that. So he's got a bionic arm or whatever.
Yeah, the opening sequence is like a dream. It's a memory, but it's a dream sequence.
Oh, okay. All right.
He's remembering the accident that cost him his arm.
Got it.
And he wakes up screaming in his bed. And you can see the remnants of his armor in the back of his apartment, like sitting on a shelf behind him. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is Bob Campbell, who at one time was employed by Ultratech, I think. I may still be. I can't remember. I don't think he is. I think he's been fired, but was running around in I assume, an old model of the prototype suit. Is that right?
Right. He was, I don't know about the original. He may have been a second or third generation, but I believe he was the original prototype. He's got a much clunkier version of the armor. It almost looks like the Juggernaut.
Yeah.
Like if you imagine Juggernaut in super armor, that's kind of what his armor looked like. It has a big dome over it, really clunky, but formidable. It has, he flies around. He's got a Gatling gun on his arm. But yeah, he's doing a demonstration for the shareholders of Ultratech, which is this tech company in the Ultraverse universe. Something goes wrong and this drone blows his arm off. And then he wakes up, a couple of years later.
Screaming. Shortly after we meet Bob, we then get to meet Glare, which almost for a very quick second, I thought his name was...
So did you think his name was Leland Glare?
Yes, I thought it was Leland Glare, because he's holding that car above his head. And I was like, Leland Glare is coming. I'm like, wait a second. And then later you find out that it's the head of Ultratech is Stanley Leland. Ultratech Stanley Leland. But anyway, I thought his name was Leland Glare. Anyway, okay, so Glare shows up. Don't know much about his power set other than he has this one eye that can apparently blind people. I know that for sure. Blind some poor lady. He's going on a rampage throughout the town, and he's screaming that Ultratech be ready because here comes Glare. Now, we get our first introduction to the newer prototype here. I know his name is Jimmy Ruiz. That's his full name, correct?
Right.
You could tell that Stanley Leland, our head of Ultratech, of course, the evil corporate leader here, is more focused on impressing people with the armor instead of the person that's in it. We have him going on another show for some people, and then we find out that Glare's taking his liberties about the town, and our new prototype, Jimmy, helmed by Jimmy, is sent out to kind of go make a good impression on some of the shareholders or whatever by taking down Glare.
Yeah, Glare kind of represents one of the big problems that Ultraverse had, which is they were building a universe from the ground up, but they were doing it all at once. So I think one of the things that suffered was the originality in some of the characters, especially the villains. Glare's pretty freaking lame. But he gives Jimmy an opponent, somebody to show off his skills against. He's formidable physically. He gives Jimmy a good fight. Just not a terribly original design, kind of a lame power set, lame character. But he gives Prototype a chance in his first issue to show off his skills. What about you? What did you think of Glare?
I was trying to figure out his power set, because other than just being strong, I was like, can the guy do anything else with this eye beam that he has?
He looks like kind of a grotesque mini Hulk. He's not as huge as the Hulk, but he's green-skinned. He's got like a white ponytail and a weird face mask with it looks like a cybernetic eye thing over his left. Is it his left eye? His right.
Right. Yep.
He can use that to blind people, and I guess he even uses it one time on Prototype, as a wider energy beam. But what purpose does that serve? He's obviously angry at Ultratech for turning him into this monster, but I don't know the origin of this eyepiece. Like, how is that useful in any way other than fighting superheroes?
No clue.
So
No
yeah,
clue.
I don't think we ever really get much more out of Glare in future issues. I don't recall.
Yeah, by the end of this, Prototype's able to kind of knock Glare down, but Glare is about to get back up. But before he does that, there is this mysterious lady, which I think she's involved with Ultratech somehow. And
I believe she's kind of like Jimmy's handler.
Okay. She walks over, touches him on the forehead, and that's it. He either died. No, actually, I think he's dead because, well, at least the people believe that he's dead. The people outside, I mean, this is happening out on the streets, folks.
Right.
You know, this is a big battle. As Glare's laying there motionless, some people are pointing up at Prototype, who's flying back in to check on Glare and see if he's down for the count. People are saying, "You've killed him."
Right. Yeah.
You killed Glare. Now, I don't know if that's his first and only appearance or if Glare gets back up, but I can tell you that if he's dead.
Yeah. If memory serves, he's dead. And
oh wow.
So it leads to public relations problems with Prototype in the future. You know, after this issue. That was a theme a lot of the Ultraverse books had too. Like, there were several big, giant corporations that were always evil, coming off the 80s. That was kind of a trend in the early 90s and mid 90s, like showcasing, Lex Luthor became a businessman, in the 80s and 90s. And it was kind of like people railing against capitalism, I guess.
Sure.
And so there was a lot of that going on in the Ultraverse books. And Ultratech was one of the big corporations that, with nefarious or at least amoral, not even amoral, immoral practices, and so yeah, a lot of the book as it progresses deals with that kind of corporate stuff. And Prototype, they have to always put on a good face. They always have to make sure that they're up in the polls as far as public relations and everything.
Representing their company in a positive light. I mean, shoot, I don't think it ends so well here where the guy's pointing at Prototype saying he's dead.
Right,
Prototype killed him.
It's a PR nightmare for them to have to do.
And then Prototype's like, serves him right.
And it's his first, it's his first mission. It's the first time he's out in public. He's at this show for the corporate shareholders or whatever earlier in the issue, and then immediately as soon as that's over, they send him out on his first mission.
Yeah, and he's not,
because they see an opportunity to put him in the spotlight, and it kind of goes wrong right away.
Well, yeah, and even during the shareholders meeting, I mean, he was having problems with the suit. Like, it's called Prototype for a reason. It's not, the finished product here. So he's got issues with the suit. And then I think it happens even during the battle. One of the other classic things I pulled out of here, I say classic, but I have a feeling this probably had to have showed up in the rest of the issues because they made a point to do it twice. And that was his catchphrase, which apparently was, "It's showtime." Now, does that come up later? Is that something that Prototype is known for saying? Because he
it
made
very
a point.
well could. I don't recall, honestly, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Jimmy is, I don't know if they say his age. I'm going to peg him around 20, 21.
He's young. He's definitely young.
So dumb kid, excited for this lifestyle he's being brought into with a lot of money, a lot of fame and everything. So, it sounds like something stupid he would be saying a lot.
You're pretty good with cops, my friend. Let's see how you handle a real 90s man.
Yeah, I know. I made note of that line as well.
Real quick, let's get back to Bob because I think Bob Campbell, he shows back up. We saw him at the beginning of the book. At the middle of the book, during the shareholders presentation, he makes a point to kind of get up in Ultratech's business, and it's kind of so. Am I right here in predicting that this is Ranger?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
One of the best things about the Prototype book is as it goes along, it's not just Jimmy's book, it's Bob's book as well.
Oh, okay.
Bob is the first Prototype, or at least the most recent one before Jimmy. He was hurt through no fault of his own, through the corporates, screwing something up, and he gets tossed aside. He's kind of slumming it, really, and the book in the next few issues is him trying to find out what's going on with Jimmy, get back in his career back on track, and eventually he develops his own suit, which is I guess he's called Ranger because that's what the trading cards say. I don't remember him going by that name in the comics. Oh. It's been a while since I've read those.
Okay.
But yeah, eventually he develops his own suit, and so it's basically a two-man book. It's not just, Jimmy's book.
Mm-hmm.
I will shout out the production value of Ultraverse at this time. They had the glossy pages, which within a year or two, pretty much industry-wide, they would go to glossy pages. But at this time, a lot of Marvel and DC books were still on newsprint. Most newsstand issues, if you got them at a grocery store or a convenience store, they were almost always going to be, even if it was Image or Malibu or Ultraverse, whatever, they were going to be newsprint. But the Ultraverse books, if you got them direct market, they were on glossy pages. They had kind of cutting edge lettering and coloring and everything. So they look really, really nice. Like the art, David Ammerman, he's the artist. He does several prototype issues. I think he does Wrath later on down the line, another Ultraverse title.
All right. Oh, yeah. Let me hop back. I want to go into the letters page here because just like we were saying, this is kind of early on in Ultraverse's run. With this being in 93, there was some interesting stuff that was going on in the back. We had the Ultra Files.
Yeah.
So Ultratorial number 3. Collect them all, apparently. But there is like a 5-step process how to make sure you get your Ultraverse titles. And I won't read everything, but it's order in advance, annoy your local retailer, go somewhere else if this doesn't work, order through the mail, go public. It says if you still can't find copies of your favorite Ultraverse titles, then the time has come to launch an all-out media blitz broadcasting this message of pain. But yeah, we have. Let's talk about what's coming up in September here of 1993. Firearm, the reluctant ex-government operative who can't stay away from cases involving dangerous ultrahumans, debuts in September with 2 great projects. Firearm, is that something that you read?
Yeah, it was something that I even like more now than I did at the time, although I liked it then, because it was the story of Alex Swan, who was a British former super spy, super soldier, sort of. He was a normal human, but he was now a PI working in California. All of the Ultraverse books, by and large, not every one, but almost all of them, are set in the LA, Malibu area. But yeah, he was working as a PI, and all of his cases sort of dealt with ultras, even though he was a normal human. And it was a very, like, film noir style crime comic, but with, super-powered characters, armored characters, etc. And James Robinson, it was one of his early books. I think he may have done Starman before this. But yeah, and it's not one of my, again, it's like a second tier Ultraverse book for me. It's really good. It's not one of my favorites, but it's really good. Also, a bit of interesting trivia with Firearm. You could mail away for Firearm number 0.
That is in this letters page.
Which is, there's a Firearm number 0 comic, and the story in the comic is actually the second part to the story that takes place in the Firearm live action VHS tape.
That's right, dude.
Where they filmed about a 15-minute short film, which you can watch on YouTube now. I've got a copy of the VHS.
I just sent you the link. I was like, there it is. I think this is 50 minutes long, so it's got to be packing. Okay, it says based on the
probably a lot of behind the scenes stuff in there too.
Okay, all right, got it.
And also, Ultraverse was trying to break new ground on a lot of stuff. They had a lot of TV commercials, which I don't think I ever saw anywhere locally. They probably mostly ran in big markets like New York and LA and stuff. But you can find those on YouTube. There was Hard Case was one of the first run titles for Ultraverse. There was a short film of Hard Case. It's more of like a sizzle reel type thing. It's just like a little bit of an action scene with a guy dressed as Hard Case. In
the comics, he was a movie star as well, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't it him? Okay. All right. Yeah. I have a feeling I might just post this YouTube link on the old Unspoken Decade website.
It's a very cool time capsule of the early 90s comic scene, really.
Oh, it's great. So, okay.
On these Ultra Files, it's got some ads for the other Ultraverse books from this month. And I can tell by looking at this that Prototype was part of the third wave.
Was it? Okay.
Because Prime is up to issue 3. Mantra and Freaks are both issue 2 this month, so they must have been part of the second wave. And then Prototype and Exiles are both number 1s on this list, so they must have been part of the third wave.
Okay. the other thing I had listed down here was the Barry Windsor Smith was coming to Ultraverse here. It said coming up in September, Barry Windsor Smith is coming with Rune, known for his work in Valiant Comics around this time, Archer and Armstrong. This is all from the wiki. However, in 1993, Windsor Smith once again found himself in opposition to company employment policies when Valiant decided to adopt the same work-for-hire practices that he had disliked in Marvel Comics, and became dissatisfied with his position in the company. They needed me as a figurehead just as much as a creator. He left Valiant soon after Jim Shooter's departure from the company, and we are about to experience him here in the Ultraverse there in September of 1993. Interesting, neat little bit of news / history there.
And Rune is, interestingly, Rune is the only Ultraverse character that has pretty much been acknowledged by Marvel since they folded the Ultraverse in the late 90s.
Oh, really?
Because they either it's just been released or it's about to be released, a Rune HeroClix.
Oh, no kidding.
The only reason I think he's being included is because there was, at one time, he possessed one of the Infinity Gems.
All right.
He's part of a HeroClix line that has to do with all the Infinity Stones, Infinity Gem stuff. But
there was
still cool to see him back.
Hell yeah, it is. Rune had a couple crossovers that I remember off the top of my head. Somebody said there was, and I probably saw this online. There was a crossover between him and Conan.
Yeah, there were two actually, two issues.
Two?
One was a comic that I assume Malibu published, or I guess it was after Marvel made the purchase, so I guess Marvel published it. But and then there was also, I think Windsor Smith did the issue that took place in the Conan magazine format that they were doing at the time.
Okay. There was
also a Silver Surfer Rune crossover.
Beat me to it, 1995, according to mycomicshop.com here. Do you have anything else you'd like to say about Prototype before we run into plugs here?
Nah, I think I'm good, man. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Ultraverse, and I'm excited to revisit in a future episode.
Hell yeah, dude. We'll be talking some more Ultraverse guaranteed at some point on down the road, I would imagine. This is our first episode. We've had quite a bit of anticipation for this, so I'm glad that, number one, I want to thank the fans of the Unspoken Decade. I want to thank all those people that look at the posts on the Facebook site and also visit the website itself, and also had shared with us their excitement of actually hearing us get on here and talk about some 90s comics. And I'll tell you guys, this is going to be a fun adventure. I can't wait. If you haven't got enough Prototype, or the creators of Prototype here, the UnspokenDecade.com does have some articles up. There is one that is, I'm going to click on the link, I think. Here we go. There's one that came out in, looks like April of 2014. The article on the UnspokenDecade.com is titled, Finding Love in a Hopeless Place, the Justice Society of America. Now, why am I tying that in with Ultraverse? It's an article involving Lynn Strazewski. Go check that out. All you'd probably have to do is type in Lynn Strazewski that's STRAZEWSKI. Type that in the search box there at UnspokenDecade.com. You could probably find that article pretty easily. And not to mention, we also have Tom Mason, the other writer here involved in Prototype. Tom Mason talks Exiles and Ultraverse. Looks like that was an article as well, written March 10th, 2015. So click on, I think both links, I'm going to try and remember, Jesse, to put these links there in our description when we post this to the website. Either way, again, type in Tom Mason at the search bar at UnspokenDecade.com. You can find some great articles, along with many, many others from great 1990s comics, all ready at your fingertips and eyeballs to read. So with that being said, I guess we'll go ahead and close this out. Let's talk about our plugs here. Chris Armstrong, plug away, sir.
You can find me on Twitter at BrodyMan34. Obviously, UnspokenDecade.com, 90s comics fan site. I've done some stuff there. I've got a Savage Dragon article up there, as well as a top 10 moments from the Infinity Gauntlet. Also, check out, of course, the Unspoken Decades Facebook page and the Ultraverse. If you're a fan of the Ultraverse, or if you're excited about getting into the Ultraverse, maybe you remember it from when you were a kid, didn't really get into it, and want to revisit some of it now, there's a great Facebook fan group. Just search Ultraverse on Facebook, and it'll pop up, I'm sure. A lot of former creators, Tom Mason and Lynn Strazewski, among others, are in that group, and they do a great job of conversing with the fans and giving them inside info and stuff. It's a great resource. And that's also the group that led me to the UnspokenDecade.com, because Dean is a member of that group, Dean Compton.
Very good. If you'd like to follow me, I'm at StizNarky on Twitter. Well, I think this brings our first episode to a close. For Chris Armstrong, I'm Jesse Starcher. This has been Unspoken Issues. We'll catch you here in a couple weeks. Keep an eye out on the Facebook page. Maybe some polls popping up soon. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us what we're going to be discussing sometime in the future. Have a great one. Bye-bye.